Hello, everyone. It's Jeannie here with you today to share a new card using Trinity Stamps Hopeful Flowers and a sentiment from the Let Love Grow stamp set. So, I had envisioned this card in my head and knew that I had to do a bit of masking and manipulating. So, I stamped everything out on a scrap piece of paper so I knew exactly where I needed to stamp and where I needed to mask. And I will say that my masking is pretty limited because of the flowers and leaves being so small, but it was totally manageable. And for the corner piece, I'll just stamp that right away. And I'm only masking off the side leaves and flowers. So although this image might be a little bit smaller than normal for masking, I went ahead and cut these out and they weren't too bad. I'm only stamping over it just a little bit so this flower piece looks continuous. And so I only need to stamp over a few leaves, and that's all you need to do for the masking. You don't have to cut out the entire image at all. And I purposely chose to do only a partial piece because I didn't want to cut the rest. So for the water can, when I first saw this image, I, for some reason, went straight to the idea that I wanted them hanging and overflowing with these flowers. And to achieve this look, I needed to mask off the little spout and the handle because I wanted it to look like little pots that were just hanging from this wooden beam. And so, one of my tricks for partial masking is using a post it to recreate my image. And so, I'll cut off the section that I don't want masked and put this together like a little puzzle. So, this is a three-part piece because I have the spout that I need masked off, and then the handle on the left side that I also need masked off. So, the middle portion would be the part where I will have it stamped off. And I'll also need that bottom part, so I'll cut that off too. So this becomes a three-piece puzzle that I put together to create a mask. So I stamp out my first image, and as you see, I don't stamp the full image, and that's okay because I'll go back and use a Copic friendly marker and draw in any parts that are missing. And because these are florals, it's pretty easy to draw. I just need to draw the leaves and the flowers, and I stamp most of it, so I'm not too concerned. So as you can see, I am also creating a second image and I'm doing the exact same thing. I'll put down the post-it and I'll piece everything together and then I'll line it up with the stamp and then remove the part that I don't want masked off and I stamp it and it recreates that first partial image. Because I wanted these three to be hanging together, I needed to create two more additional masks of the full image to cover it up so I can stamp one more right behind it. And I only cut out a partial mask because that's the only area that I need stamped. So again, with my puzzle piece of a masking, I put down the first part, the middle part, and then the left hand side and remove the part that I want masked. I'll line up the stamp where the image is, and then I'll go ahead and stamp it. So this works out perfectly, and I have three hanging flower pots. And like I said, there are these parts of the flowers that are missing and the pot that needs to be drawn in. And I just use a Copic friendly marker to do this. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I am using the stamp image for reference just so I can fill in those parts. With partial masking, it's just really hard to get a perfect mask, right? So, like, it'll be a very difficult task to do so, and you shouldn't be too concerned about it. For the corner floral piece, I imagined that it was on a wooden beam and it's just covering it. So I'm just drawing in straight lines in pencil for now, and I'll go back in and line that. For the hanging pots, I just have two straight lines, and so it looks like it's hanging from that wooden beam. And for the wooden beam, I just wanted to add a few more floral images to it just to look like it doesn't stop right away. It just has a little flower at the edge and it just makes it look more complete. So, pardon my head, but I'm just going in and lining those wooden beam lines, and it starts to come together. And I love creating a scene that you don't really expect from a stamp set, right? You just add a few additional images, and you're using your stamp set in a brand new way. And my idea has come together where these three pots are just hanging. And I will say I was a little intimidated with coloring these florals because the pieces were so little. So I went in with the easiest part first. I just went in with the leaves. The leaves were pretty easy to identify, and I just went in, colored everything that thought was a leaf. And I will say that I do end up going back because I did miss some, and that's okay too. And even if you colored wrong, honestly, you probably wouldn't notice. I think that people look at the full scene versus very specific areas. And I think sometimes as card makers, we're a little bit hard on ourselves because we scrutinize every little mistake that we make, but it's very unnoticeable by other people that are taking a look at it. So I also drew from the Trinity Creativity Challenge image, and it was inspiration for the colors I chose for this card. So there were some pink flowers and some really bright yellow flowers, and those are the two colors I used for the florals here. For the pink flowers, it is a majority of the card, but I really enjoyed the little pops of yellow that I added in. It just gave it a little bit of brightness, and it added a little different interest to it because it wasn't just one note. So, because these images are pretty small, I'm not doing much shading. I'm actually trying to define the pink flowers a little bit more by using three Copic colors, but it not very much blending at all. So once I finish coloring all the flowers and the leaves, I'll go in and know exactly what else to color for the wooden beam. So I'll just go in and color the entire beam, and I'll go in with darker colors to add a little wood grain effect. So it really sets the scene for this little wood beam. And I mean, I live in the city, so I wouldn't have this in my backyard, but I imagine that there's houses that have this where flowers can grow everywhere, and you have this like wooden beam and the ceiling where flowers are just like everywhere. And I think that that'd be really perfect on like a spring day. And I think that the colors I use really make it look like a spring day, a very happy card. So again, I'll go back in with the same colors I used for the flowers on the wooden beam for the flowers in the hanging pot. I'm keeping this very consistent with the pink florals and the pops of yellow. And I think that this card came out very well. And this was exactly how I had envisioned in my head. I'm not doing anything special with the coloring. All the colors that I'm using will be listed down below, so you can use it as a reference. And I'll also list down the Copic friendly marker that you can use so your ink doesn't smear. So like I said, my coloring isn't very spectacular. It's very easy. I'm using the darkest color to add a little details to the petals, just so there's some contrast with the flowers so it doesn't look one note. I chose not to blend for that reason. The effect of the flickers of lines really stands out when you look at it as a whole. Like for one floral image, it kind of looks like, hey, you should have blended that. But I think that it really added to the look of the flowers here. So for the hanging pots, I'm just coloring them in with a little gray. And this is more or less my card. I will go ahead and grab the Let Love Grow happy birthday sentiment and add it to the bottom right of the card, only because this hopeful flower set doesn't come with the sentiment. So I just really needed to add one because the bottom right hand corner looked a little blank. And I also solved this by actually trimming down this piece. I believe I trimmed it down half an inch, so I had a quarter of an inch on each side. I picked a matching pink cardstock to back it, And so that really helps fill up that space. I toyed with the idea of adding embellishments, but I really thought that I just would leave it alone because the flowers looked so detailed and I didn't really want to take away from the florals. So I just went ahead and stamped it, and I think that trimming it down the card panel really worked. I also decided to pop this card panel up on foam tape just to give it a bit of dimension. So I'm just covering the entire back with foam tape, and I'll add it to that pink background. And once I add that card panel to the pink background, I'll pop it up on a card base, and this card is done. So I hope you enjoyed this card and enjoyed seeing how this scene came together. Sometimes when you envision a card in your head, it doesn't necessarily turn out. And luckily for me, it did for this particular card. And I hope that you take this idea and apply it to others. The post it puzzle masking technique really comes in handy for me because I do a lot of masking, and it's a easy way to do this without getting frustrated or wiping things off on the stamp. And so that's it for today's card, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for stopping by.